and a bit long. Goeiemorgen mense. Alright, as you can see behind me over here, this Kikuyu Bermuda mix is looking a little bit long. It hasn't been mowed in about 2 weeks. It's averaging 40 millimeters. Some blades are sitting over 50 millimeters or around 50 mil. So I need to tackle this today. But remember that before you just go and mow at wherever your mower was set up last, you might have to do some adjustments, otherwise you're going to end up sculpting your lawn. And I don't need to sculpt my lawn right now. I just did a monstrous sculpt session a little while ago. Everything is nice and tight at the moment. All that I need to do is adjust my height of cut, maybe give the mower a bit of service, check the blade, all that kind of stuff. So we'll do that today. You got to make sure all that's right before you go and mow. So let's just get into this and see where it takes us. Right, so both these guys need a proper cleanup. I haven't cleaned them, as in cleaned them at all, since the last mow. So about 2 weeks, Frankenstein's been sitting with all this muck all over him. That's not good for your mower. You're going to induce rust, especially if there's moisture there. So let's give these a spray off, and then we're going to do a light service. Now that you've gone and blasted your mower with water, you've probably blasted some of the lube out of the different areas. So make sure that you get oil or grease or whatever is required for the different components back into those components. And of course, when spraying, just remember not to spray into anything that allows water to get into your engine, into your fuel, and so on. That's a bit of an obvious thing, I think, but got to say just in case. Additionally, if you've got an electric mower, don't just go spraying the thing with water. Some motors, electric motors, are RP rated and sealed to some extent that you can spray them, but not all of them are. So just check out for that, or be aware of it. Remember, before you start working on your machine, unplug the spark plug, fuel off, and that you've pulled your recoil starter so that it's under pressure and that you know that your valves are closed. Alright, I don't know if you saw there, I had to change from that guy over to that guy because I realized that I had a blockage in this bearing housing over here. So to force it out, I couldn't get the kind of grip and pressure that I needed from that guy. So I put this nozzle in and forced it through, and that's because I haven't greased up in a while. What's supposed to happen, you can see there in that gap, the grease must come out through and basically push out all the old mucky grease. Must go through the bearing and it must come out the housing there against your cutting cylinder's shaft. It must do that. It mustn't be bubbling up and flowing back out through this little grease nipple over here. Then you clean it up with your finger or a piece of paper towel or a rag or whatever, and then you're good to go. Now that you've greased all them nipples and stuck some oil in the little parts that need oil, make sure that you don't forget small things like your height adjusters. You can see I've stuck a bit of oil in them as well. So now we're going to adjust the height of cut. Now the way that you approach that is to take note of your grass's current length. So for example, now I haven't mowed in 2 weeks, but maybe in your case it's because you went away on vacation. Let's use that as the example now. We've got the Christmas holidays coming up. You're probably going to go away for a couple of weeks. You come back, your grass is going to be long. So the first thing that you do is measure how tall your grass is. You're going to say, okay, my grass is 40 mils. Probably won't be, but let's say it was 40 mils. That means that you can only mow down to 30 mils without causing some kind of damage to your grass. Maybe that damage isn't noticeable straight after the mow, but after day 2, 3, 4, you will start to see some discoloration. This is why they say never to remove more than 1/3 of the leaf at any given occasion. However, if you come back and your grass is really long and it's looking a bit messed up and it's Kikuyu or Bermuda, just go right ahead and clop it right back. And the way that you approach what that's called is a height of cut reset. The way that you approach that is that you need to take it down to about half of where you want it to be. So let's say, for example, you wanted a 15 mil height of cut. You need to go right back to 7.5 or 8 mil, smack it a good couple of times, and then readjust your mower's height of cut back up to that 15 mil mark slowly over time. You have to go back to about half of what you want it to be, or you're going to end up with some funny discoloration and little patches and all that kind of stuff. Alright, so to adjust your height of cut, you're going to need a bunch of tools. That's dependent on your specific machine. I've also pulled out the tools, just the 2 spanners and 1 screwdriver that I need to loosen up not just the front roller for height of cut adjustment, but also the cutting cylinder, so that we can adjust the cutting cylinder to the bed knife to make sure that we're cutting correctly all the way across the blade. Now, the most important part of all of this is that you have to have a height of cut bar. If you don't have one, you are guessing. End of story. There isn't really much more to say about that. The calipers are there to set up the height of cut bar. You loosen up according to your machine, adjust the height of cut, checking both sides of the front roller against the rear roller, and against obviously the point that you're trying to make contact with is the cutting point on the bed knife. Otherwise, you're not going to get it right. It's as simple as that. So let's do that quick. Alright, so as you can tell there now, I'm not cutting. It's a lot worse than what I thought it was, and that's just from a couple of sculpt sessions, well, one really hard sculpt session that you guys saw, and then a couple of other height of cut resets. But you can tell I barely adjusted, which means that I'm not far out. So I just adjusted the screws very little, and I made contact with the bed knife. But because I'm making contact with the bed knife, and there is, you can hear it, there's friction, it's not cutting. That means that I need a backlap. If I had big striations all over my cutting cylinder, then I would need a grind. So this is just an indication that I need a backlap. I think I'm gonna have to do that quick. Okay, so we're gonna take off the side chain cover and then just remove the chain that goes to the cutting cylinder. Alright, so that can get packed away. I've now pulled out the drill. You've got to make sure that you have the correct socket and the attachment for your drill to connect to that nut over there, and that's going to spin the cutting cylinder in the reverse direction to what it usually spins, and that's going to help us with the backlap. But the very first thing that you do, besides getting out the tools, is you check for any noises, and you would have heard it earlier on. There's a You hear that? It's like a ting ting. There. That ain't right. So what you're going to do, to me it sounds like it's coming from this side. I'm going to back off just a little bit over there and see if that corrects it. And you do basically this process, just only making barely any contact, but all the way across the blade and as evenly as possible. Let me show you another trick for that quick. All right, so you've tilted the machine back. Now what you do is you put your fingers on the bed knife underneath and you feel, as you're busy rotating the cutting cylinder, you feel for where that click is sort of most obvious. It's here. And there's barely any click here. And that's an indication of whether or not you're over tightening. Obviously don't put your finger there because it's not going to go very well for you. Trust me, I know. But there's a click there. You might even be able to see it. There it is there. That. So let's just check if it's grass or something obvious. Okay, so that's just a funky blade in that position on the bed knife. That one's not doing it. It's that one. So now what we're going to do is back off here. We're going to adjust here until we feel like that is just barely making any sort of impact, because that's the first and most obvious place that impact is taking place, which means that when you start your backlap, this actually needs to grind down, or this little portion that's the arrow basically, needs to grind first. You do not want to over tighten because you're going to make this portion eat more into your bed knife. That's going to cause your bed knife to wear unevenly. So you check for where that place is, and now you go and you readjust 2 million times until you make barely any contact, but with as much even contact across the whole bed knife as possible still. So we're going to eat into that portion first when we start backlapping. So let me just toy with it for another minute or so. See that? Barely any adjustment. Now it's completely free. Just making contact with the bearing housing. There's the nick. So now it's not making any contact anywhere else, but it's nicking there. Make sure this is loose enough. Schuhfla. Just check for anything else that might be obvious. Maybe there's something stuck there. This blade here. Okay, so I can feel like a funny little ridge over here. I think I might have hit something, or maybe not something hard like a stone, but maybe there actually is a little lump there. I think I clocked a stone, and that's caused this. Yeah, there it is. There's like a little bumpy there, and that is probably what's causing the issue. Luckily, it doesn't feel too hectic, but it's just enough to make that little tick now that I've loosened up enough. So it's just loose enough that we're running mostly free with barely any contact. I can still hear that steel on steel sound just a little bit, and then it makes contact at that point. So we're going to ground that sucker out of there. So now what we do, you've got to try and make sure that you tighten everything back up again. So lock all the required bolts or nuts and tighten up, and then we'll start the back lap. Alright, so now you've got to get some grounding paste out, give it a good mix. If you're going to do something stupid like what I did, you use one of your screwdrivers. Luckily this one was old already. Just remember that you'll grind away the magnetic tip. So, you know, don't do that. Use a scrap piece of metal or something to mix the stuff. It's metal mixed with a lubrication, I think a type of grease or something like that. That's the grounding paste, so just be careful of it. And definitely, I mean, getting it on your skin is not the end of the world. You can wash it off. But getting it in your eyes, remember, it's little pieces of metal. You do not want that in your eyes. So wear, at the very least, some proper eye protection. Then you're going to get yourself the applicable socket and a connecting little torty over there to make sure that it fits into your drill. Get that guy on there. Make sure that it's all nicely lined up so that you don't bend the bit or mess up your drill. The last thing you want to do is mess up your drill, and just make sure that it's a proper drill, not a little toy. Otherwise you're going to burn the thing out and just, you know, you're wasting money. All right, so the process is, pretending that I don't have that little kink over there, that you're going to adjust the cutting cylinder to the bed knife as perfectly as possible all the way across the blade and bed knife, making sure that you're just barely making contact, because the grinding paste is going to make up the remainder of that space, and it's going to be grinding away metal. So you don't want to put it under so much friction. You'll hear when I run the blade just now that it generates a lot of friction just having that paste in there, because it's grinding away the metal. So just barely making contact, and you only want to be doing little slithers at a time, readjusting the cutting cylinder back to the bed knife every now and then to make sure that you're getting everything nice and straight. Get your drill set up, get the grinding paste mixed up, and let's start this process. See that? Barely making contact, barely any grinding paste. It's already made up enough friction that it doesn't spin freely anymore. Just a little side note is that you don't want to run your drill too fast, because what's going to happen is it'll just spatter more of the material outwards and you'll make a hell of a mess. You can see I've got barely any mesh here. It's barely spraying anything anyway. And that's because I'm only running the machine just fast enough to cause the paste itself to just keep itself basically at the edge of the blade, therefore using the paste as opposed to spraying it everywhere. Otherwise, you're just going to be adding more and more grinding paste, wasting more money on grinding paste. Well, looks good so far. I think that actually might be all that I need to do here. Let's just check. Okay, let's give this a rinse off and see how we're cutting. Yeah, it's now all of a sudden free. So now let's just readjust the cutting cylinder to the bed knife and just check if we got any cutting happening and that it's even. I think we might have won just with that. Look at that. Look at that edge, how clean it is now. Okay, so first you just listen for it. You hear that? Maybe slightly too much on this end. Too little. Let's get some paper and see. Yeah, yeah. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, 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 yes. Now you're just getting silly. You're going to cut yourself. Tighten up again, and Bob's your uncle. Double check after you've tightened up. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, shit. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. All right, so my wife has just reminded me that we got to go to my daughter's ballet. So I'm going to leave this alone and carry on tomorrow. All right, next day, but it's way too hot to mow right now, so I'll do it later this afternoon. But one thing that I forgot to mention that's a very good way to see if you are adjusting your cutting cylinder to the bed knife correctly is to look at how the bed knife has worn. So you take a measurement of the one side and you have a look in the middle, and you go to the other side and you take another measurement all the way across. And if it's nice and even and it doesn't have like a little bit worn here and a lot worn there, then you're doing the right thing. If you feel like too little's come off, let's say for example this side, that means that you do need to, when backlapping, adjust a little bit tighter on this end, but I mean a hair tighter, so that you can just eat into that little less worn out portion first, and then you start evening out the blade as you go through the backlapping process. And then of course, while things are open, just make sure that your chains are lubed up and all the rest is looking good. Check your spark plug, make sure it's not dirty. Check your air filter, make sure that's also not dirty. And if you really feel like it, you can change the oil. I'll probably do that next weekend. I'm not really in the mood right now. And of course, don't forget to check the very edges. Perfect. Perfect. So the video didn't exactly go to plan, but at least we got a nice mow out of it. So thanks again for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, share this with your buddies, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.